Thank you for choosing American Pest CEUs. Hi, I'm Sean Reeves. I'm an Associate Certified Entomologist with American Pest CEUs. I've been in the pest management industry since 1999, and I'll be your instructor for today's course. Today's course was compiled by Jack Launius, who has served in the pest management industry since 1990. Today's course is on Core Chapter 4, Part 2, Pesticide Formulations. Learning Objectives. After studying this chapter, you should be able to discuss the properties of common formulations, evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of the formulations described in this chapter, explain the roles of adjuvants. Other formulations. This section describes other formulations that are not easily classified as a liquid or dry solid, are formulated and/or applied as gases, have some special packaging or delivery method. Let's talk about fumigants. Fumigants are pesticides that deliver the active ingredient to the target site in the form of a gas. Some active ingredients are liquids when packaged under high pressure, but become gases when released. Other active ingredients are volatile liquids. They may be enclosed in an ordinary container and not packaged under pressure. Still others are solids that release gases after application in humid conditions or in the presence of water or water vapor. Now, fumigants are used for structural pest control in food and grain storage facilities and in regulatory pest control at ports of entry and state and national borders. In agricultural pest control, fumigants are effective in soil, greenhouses, and commodity storage areas such as grain bins. That brings up an important question. How important is fumigation? Commodity fumigation is highly important in the U.S., as it acts as a crucial preventative measure to protect the quality and value of agricultural goods by eliminating pests through the supply chain, safeguarding businesses involved in shipping, warehousing, manufacturing, and agriculture from significant losses due to pest contamination, making it a critical practice for maintaining the integrity of exported and imported commodities. I have to tell you guys a quick story about fumigation. Back in 2016, I got my fumigation license. I actually went to the University of Florida School of Fumigation. I got my license and got some education from a guy that worked for the USDA. And he was telling me, like down in Miami and a lot of these areas where they have ports, fumigation's huge. So when people try to import things like fruits, vegetables, and all these other things, they inspect them. And immediately when they find invasive species and things like that, those things are fumigated right there on site. If it wasn't for those fumigation services, we would have so many more invasive species and major issues that would really hurt our food supply. But it would also upend our natural environment because you would have invasive species that are not natural to the environment, and we all know that causes major issues in the future. And this doesn't even mention the fact that you also have a lot of fumigation done on residential structures and commercial structures in areas like the Gulf Coast area, even the Atlantic coast, maybe upwards to the North Carolinas, and out west, some areas where they have drywood termites. Drywood termites are a really big deal in these areas, and one of the best ways to get rid of them is fumigation. Fumigation is sometimes used in treatments for other insects such as bedbugs and even cockroaches. I know that may surprise some of you, but I've been around long enough where I've definitely seen fumigations done for these types of insects. So fumigation is a very important service in pest control. Although many of you may never be involved in a fumigation, it is good to know and understand how important it is to our industry. Let's talk about some of the advantages of fumigants. They are toxic to a wide range of pests. They can penetrate cracks, crevices, wood, and tightly packed areas such as soil or grains. A single treatment will usually kill most pests in the treated space. Now, as you can imagine with fumigants, there's definitely going to be some disadvantages as well. The target site must be enclosed or covered to prevent the gas from escaping. Nonspecific and highly toxic to humans and all other organisms. high inhalation exposure risk. Most require the use of specialized personal protective equipment, may require the use of specialized application equipment. Some have specific temperature requirements. One last thing on fumigations. Fumigations are a highly effective way to control pests. The major issues with fumigations are safety because of the toxic nature of the gases employed. Always make sure safety is your biggest concern when performing a fumigation. Fumigations must be performed to label standards for another reason. Because of the simple fact gas can easily escape from the tarping system, causing the fumigation to be ineffective. What we're stating here is when you're doing a fumigation, you have to be very meticulous. Basically, when it comes to fumigations, you just have to make sure you understand safety is of the utmost importance. People die in fumigations. I can tell you stories throughout the years where lives have been lost because somebody did not follow protocol in fumigations. This is why you don't see a lot of fumigators, because they are dangerous in nature. But if you follow the label and you go through the protocols, you should be just fine. Also, you have to understand with fumigations, as you can see in the tinning system at the bottom of the screen, if you don't have everything sealed up correctly, if there's any way that gas can escape, they're not going to be effective. So keep in mind, when doing a fumigation, you have to follow the label standards very closely, and you have to make sure that gas does not escape, or it's not going to be an effective fumigation. Let's talk about microencapsulated pesticides, denoted by the letter M. Microencapsulated pesticides are dry particles or liquid droplets surrounded by a coating. Coatings may be plastic, starch, or some other material. Microencapsulated pesticides are mixed with water and applied as a spray. Once applied, the pesticide is released from the capsule. In some situations, the encapsulation process can provide timed, slow release of the active ingredient. Depending on the physical properties of the coating, release of the pesticide active ingredient may be weather dependent. If the release is slower than normal, for example due to dry or cool weather, residues may remain on treated plants or surfaces longer than expected. As a result, some microencapsulated products have relatively long restricted entry or pre-harvest entry intervals. Some microencapsulated pesticide products contain highly toxic materials with a coating to increase handler safety. Others are microencapsulated for different reasons, for example to reduce staining or odor or to protect the active ingredient from photo degradation. I can tell you, coming from the pest control side, that idea of a microcap or a microencapsulated pesticide, one of the big reasons why we use them is to protect from that photo degradation. So ideally, basically, they can be outside longer, and even with the UV rays and things like that, they're still going to stay effective. A lot of times, pest control people will roll them out like that, even to their clients, and let them know they're using that type of product because of that longer residual. Either way, the goal is they don't break down as quickly, so we do get a longer residual effect. Highly toxic microencapsulated pesticides may be very hazardous to bees if the particles do not break down quickly and are the same size as pollen grains. Foraging bees may collect them and carry them back to the hive. Later, when the coatings break down and release the pesticide, the colony may be poisoned. Some microencapsulated soil-applied products may be more prone to leaching. Couple of important things here. As everybody knows, we need to be looking at protecting bees these days, especially honeybees because they're pollinators. So you have to be very careful with these microencapsulated pesticides. Look around the area you're going to be treating with and just see if there's foraging bees, because this can be an issue. Also, we have to understand that these products can be more prone to leaching, so just make sure you read the label on these. I'm definitely not against microencapsulated pesticides. I think they can be a great product to use. We just have to think about these couple of issues and make sure we read the labels to understand when and where to apply them and what those concerns are. Now, with microencapsulated pesticides, there's definitely going to be some good advantages. First, coatings help protect the applicator. Secondly, they're easy to mix, handle, and apply. Third, time release of active ingredient prolongs effectiveness, i.e. may result in fewer applications. Application timing may be less critical. 4. Reduced volatility. 5. Reduced odor. 6. Less likely to stain or otherwise damage treated surfaces. And 7. Reduce phytotoxicity. And I just want to mention here what phytotoxicity is. Phytotoxicity is plant damage caused by pesticides, fertilizers, air pollutants, and other chemicals. It's important that you know some of the symptoms of phytotoxicity. One could be leaf burn. This would be scorched or dead areas on leaves, often starting at the edges, or chlorosis, yellowing of leaves due to chlorophyll degradation. You could also see leaf distortion, curling, cupping, or other abnormal leaf shapes. You may see stunted growth, reduced plant size or slow development, or abnormal growth, excessive growth on either certain parts or the entire plant. I'm bringing this up because when we talk about phytotoxicity and you see that in the formulations for a higher risk of phytotoxicity could cause these types of damages to plants you're seeing on the screen. Whereas if we have a lower risk of phytotoxicity, there's less of a concern that we're going to damage things like lawns and ornamentals. This is something you need to think about when you make your decisions for pesticide use and what type of formulations you're going to use in different areas. With microencapsulated pesticides, there's going to be some disadvantages. 1. Constant agitation may be necessary in spray tank, depending on the properties of the coating. 2. Risk of injuring or killing bees if the microencapsulated product is toxic to them. 3. Long, restricted entry or pre-harvest intervals for highly toxic products. Let's talk about water-soluble packaging, WSB or WSP. More and more pesticide products are available in water-soluble bags, WSBs. A special film packages a precise amount of wettable powder, soluble powder, or gel containing the pesticide active ingredients. When looking further at water-soluble packaging, WSB or WSP, when added to water in a spray tank, the bag dissolves and releases the contents, which are then suspended or dissolved. This packaging method reduces handler exposure risk. It also simplifies measuring. However, water-soluble packaging is just that, as a rule. It will not dissolve in organic solvents or undiluted ECs. As a result, mixers and loaders must follow label instructions when preparing a spray mixture. Store water-soluble products in a dry place and do not handle them with damp or wet gloves. Let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of water-soluble packaging, WSB or WSP. First, with the advantages, they are accurate, pre-measured unit doses, increase handler safety, greatly reduced exposure risk, lower risk of spills. Now with the disadvantages of this formulation, package size may not match volume of prepared solution needed and/or spray tank volume. May not be suitable for products applied in pounds or gallons of active ingredient per acre due to the size or number of packets required. Must be kept dry, away from water or high humidity until ready to use. Let's take a look at impregnates. Some pesticide products consist of a pesticide active ingredient incorporated into a solid material, usually some kind of plastic. The pesticide evaporates or is released over time, and the vapors control nearby pests. Common examples include livestock ear tags, plastic pest strips and adhesive tapes, pet collars. Fertilizers may also be impregnated with pesticides. So I just want to mention this, and most of you will understand this. If you've ever seen a dog or a cat with a flea collar, that would be an impregnate or an impregnated pesticide. So that's something that's released over a period of time, which in that case would be to keep the pet itself from getting fleas. But that kind of helps you understand what an impregnate is, and it is something that's definitely used in the livestock industry as well. I've worked with cattle for years growing up, and you would definitely see the ear tags on the cattle to protect them from things like hornflies, spinosaurid ear ticks, and lice. This was just one of the ways that we could kind of help to protect the cattle. There was no perfect way, but these ear tags were the best method we could find. Let's talk about animal systemics. Animal systemics are absorbed by, enter the tissues of, and move within the treated animal. Usually these pesticides are applied externally or orally. They can control fleas and other blood-feeding insects. They can control fleas and other external blood-feeding insects, as well as worms and other internal parasites. External application methods include pour-on liquids, sprays, and dust. Oral applications include food additives and pre-measured capsules, paste, or liquids. I want you to remember and understand the word systemics. A systemic product is something that's going to go internally or be absorbed inside of something. Like if a product is systemic and it goes into, let's say, a cow's body, then obviously it's in their system. That's what systemic means. Or in a plant, if a plant absorbs a product, it's systemic. If it goes down into the main structure of the plant or down into its roots, then of course it would be systemic. Another thing you're going to want to understand is on a lot of your pesticide and herbicide labels, it's going to tell you if a product is systemic. I commonly see on labels, do not use this product around fruit and nut bearing trees because this is a systemic product. So it's a product that you definitely don't want to go into food because it is systemic and it is going to be inside that plant or that food. And if somebody consumes it, they are going to be consuming some of that systemic pesticide. Sometimes we're going to have some combination products. Let's talk about pesticide fertilizer combinations. Many pesticide products, usually granule and pellet formulations, are combinations of fertilizers and pesticides. Such products are convenient because they allow the applicator to control pests and apply nutrients at the same time. Some are prepackaged. Homeowners commonly use them for their lawns. Dealers or growers make custom mixed pesticides with fertilizers to meet specific crop requirements. A simple example of this, if you go to any hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, any local hardware, you're going to see these pesticide fertilizer combination products sold to homeowners. So this is really easy to buy and a lot of people use them. Unfortunately, they're probably one of the biggest offenders when it comes to these types of products because they're not trained on how to apply them. They think more is better. That's the old saying, more is better. But the reality is more is not better. You always want to follow the label. I feel like when we talk about the environment and a lot of things that happen out there, it's really your untrained people like homeowners putting out too much of a product or putting it out at the wrong time where you get some pesticide movement away from the area. That's really where we get into trouble and things happen in the environment and we have those adverse impacts we're not looking for. Most of your trained people and people like us that are taking these courses, we understand when, where, and how to use these pesticides and we don't have as many problems. Pesticide mixtures. Sometimes product manufacturers combine pesticides with other pesticides or fertilizers for sale as premixes. See pesticide fertilizer combinations above. However, when premixes are not available, are not offered in the desired combination, you may combine products at the time of application. Tank mixing. Combining two or more crop production products, pesticides and or fertilizers, and applying them at the same time is convenient and cost effective. This practice can save time, labor, fuel, and equipment wear involved in multiple applications. This is a common sense thing. We need to make sure when we're looking at these combining of pesticides, we have to understand if they can work together. Are they compatible? So as you go through trainings in core pesticide handling and use, you're going to learn about what pesticides are compatible with each other and which are not. So if you have to go out and spray a large area of several acres and you have to put out 2 pesticides that are compatible, obviously we can cut our labor time in half by doing them both in one application. We just have to understand, if those products are not compatible and can't be tank mixed together, then we can't do that. A lot of the time they can be. Once again, you need to learn more about core pesticide handling and use. Also read the labels, and that helps you understand if 2 types of pesticides can be mixed together a lot of times. When it comes to combining these products, proper mixing order is crucial. Make sure to add the components of your desired tank mix in the order listed below. Fill the tank halfway, full with clean water. Do not pour concentrated pesticide directly into an empty tank. If the pesticide calls for the use of ammonium sulfate, AMS, then add that after the water. I'm not going to go deep into this right at the moment, but just keep in mind that proper tank mixing, the order of how you mix different pesticide formulations, is very important, and that will be something you'll see on core exams. So just make sure you fully understand the proper order of tank mixing different pesticide formulations. It's important, obviously, because you need to understand how to mix the pesticides correctly. And once again, this is a very common question on core exams that you're going to need to pass to be a pesticide handler and applicator. Let's talk about water dispersible products such as wettable powders, WP, and dry flowables, WF, go next. It's a good idea to pre-slurry these products before adding them to the tank. Agitate the tank until all products have formed a solution. Microcapsulate suspension products go in next. Liquids and emulsifiable concentrates. The final thing that goes into the tank are the surfactants. Any necessary non-ionic surfactants, crop oil concentrates, or methylated seed oils will go in here at the end. Tank mixing also reduces soil compaction and the risk of mechanical damage to crops or treated areas. Situations appropriate for tank mixing include combining fungicides and insecticides to treat fruit trees or field crops. Another common example is combining herbicides to increase the number of weed species control spectrum. However, products must be compatible in order to be tank mixed. I want to give you the definition of control spectrum. A control spectrum pesticide refers to the range of pests that a particular pesticide is designed to kill, essentially indicating its effectiveness against different types of pests. A broad spectrum pesticide targets a wide variety of pests, while a narrow spectrum pesticide only targets a specific pest species. Keep in mind, when you want to use a broad spectrum product, it's okay, but you have to understand that's going to target a lot of different pests. Whereas sometimes we want to use a more narrow spectrum pesticide that's only going to target a certain species. So we're really only having a problem with one species. Let's say, like, if I go into a home and I'm targeting German cockroaches, I really need a narrow spectrum product that's going to work for those German cockroaches, because I'm not having an issue with something else. Or said in a different way, even if they're having an issue with ants or something like that, I'm still going to use a narrow spectrum product focused on those German cockroaches, and then I probably would use something else different for those ants. So I just want you to understand that difference between a broad spectrum and a narrow spectrum product, because you're going to get questions on exams, and you're going to have to know that when it says broad spectrum, it means it kills a wide variety of pests, and that narrow is going to be more focused on a specific pest species. Let's think about federal law when it comes to this. Federal law allows applicators to combine pesticides unless the labeling of one or more components of the intended tank mix specifically prohibits it. If no prohibitions exist, applicators may mix pesticide with fertilizer, 2 or more pesticides. When pesticides are tank mixed, all of the dosages must be at or below the label rate for each separate component of the mixture. Once again, this lets us know where federal law chimes in on this, so we can definitely mix a pesticide with a fertilizer or even 2 or more pesticides, just keeping in mind they do need to be compatible. But also understand you've got to follow the label. The label's still the law. So when you're tank mixing these, you have to make sure the dosages are at or below the label rate for each separate component of the mixture. The point we're making here is nothing changes on that. The label's still the law, and you're still going to need to mix these pesticides correctly per the label rates. Another important term when it comes to pesticide use is going to be adjuvants. An adjuvant is a chemical that can affect how a pesticide works. Adjuvants improve the action of a pesticide, change the characteristics of a pesticide formulation or a spray mixture, suspension, or solution. Most in-use pesticide products, especially those that are applied to foliage, contain adjuvants. However, in some situations, applicators may add them to a tank mix when making a finished spray mixture. Many adjuvants increase effectiveness and/or safety. Although they enhance the action of a pesticide or modify the properties of a spray solution, adjuvants alone have no pesticidal activity. Use them to customize the product or formulation for specific needs or to compensate for local conditions. Because adjuvants lack pesticidal properties, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency does not register them. As a result, there are no standards for composition, quality, or performance. If you have questions about an adjuvant, contact the manufacturer. Companies that produce these products can provide labels, technical data sheets, safety data sheets, SDSs, supplemental labeling, and promotional literature. Before using any adjuvant, consult the pesticide product label. Some products have very specific adjuvant recommendations or prohibition. If a label instructs you to use an adjuvant, use the type called for at the directed rate. As noted, many products already contain those adjuvants deemed necessary or useful by the manufacturer or formulator. Adding others may actually decrease efficacy and result in unintended and possibly undesirable effects. So a lot of you may have already heard of adjuvants or maybe know a little bit about them. The reality is you definitely got to make sure there's no prohibitions on your pesticide label before you use an adjuvant, or you have to know if there's a specific adjuvant recommended. So not all adjuvants are going to be the same, and not all are made to work with the same products. One thing you have to be careful of that we talked about in this slide, adding adjuvants that should not be mixed with a pesticide you're using can actually decrease efficacy or result in that unintended or possibly undesirable effects. So actually, there could be undesirable effects to the environment, but also it can neutralize your pesticide. So just because an adjuvant is a good thing, if you don't use it correctly, it could actually have a negative impact on your pesticide and how effective it is. So keep in mind, read the label, understand what adjuvants should be used with the product you're using, and then applicate correctly according to those labeled rates. This brings up a good question. Why would I use an anti-foaming agent? You would use an anti-foaming adjuvant in pesticides when the spray mixture is producing excessive foam during mixing or application, which can hinder the effectiveness of the pesticide by impacting the spray pattern and calibration due to excessive air bubbles. This is especially relevant when using certain surfactants or agitating the spray tank vigorously. Let's talk about types of adjuvants. There are many types of adjuvants. Here are some that are commonly used. Again, anti-foaming or defoaming agents reduce foaming of spray mixtures that may result from using some surfactants and/or from vigorous agitation. Buffers or pH modifiers allow pesticides to be mixed with dilutants or other pesticides of different acidity or alkalinity. Most pesticide solutions or suspensions are stable between pH 5.5 and 7.0, slightly acidic to neutral. Water outside this range may cause pesticides to degrade very rapidly. In some cases, if you use a buffer, add it to the spray tank water first and mix well. The water must be pH neutral, or slightly acidic to start before adding pesticides or other adjuvants. Now, we talked earlier about compatibility of pesticides. You also need to know that there's compatibility agents. These compatibility agents help combine pesticides or pesticides and fertilizers effectively. They reduce or eliminate incompatibility. Drift control additives, deposition aids, reduce drift, increase average droplet size, and or lower the number of fines, very small droplets, produced. Now, when we discuss emulsifiers, they're going to be different. These allow petroleum-based pesticides, ECs, to mix with water. Extenders keep pesticides active on a target for an extended period. Some adjuvant manufacturers use this name for stickers. So when would I use an emulsifier? You would use an emulsifier with a pesticide when the pesticide is formulated in a solvent that doesn't mix well with water, like an oil-based pesticide, allowing it to be effectively mixed with water for spraying by creating a stable emulsion where the pesticide particles are evenly dispersed throughout the water mixture. Essentially, an emulsifier is needed to combine an oil-based pesticide with water for application. That brings us to another question. When would I use an extender? You would use an extender adjuvant with a pesticide when you want to increase the duration of the pesticide's effectiveness on a plant surface, essentially making it stick longer and preventing it from being washed off by rain or irrigation, thereby extending its residual activity on the target plant. So basically, an extender does exactly what it says it does. It extends the effectiveness of the pesticide, and at times we're definitely going to need that, like it's being talked about here. When we have rain or irrigation, it can be especially important to use an extender to make sure that product stays effective for that longer period of time. Invert emulsifiers. These allow water-based pesticides to mix with petroleum carrier. Plant penetrants allow the pesticide to pass through, penetrate, the outer surface to the inside of treated foliage. Certain plant penetrants may increase penetration on some but not all plant species. Safeners reduce the toxicity of a pesticide formulation to the pesticide handler or to the treated surface. So when would I use an invert emulsifier? You would use an invert emulsifier adjuvant with a pesticide when you need to minimize spray drift and improve rain resistance, particularly in situations where the pesticide is being applied near sensitive areas like waterways or along rights of way, as the oil-based emulsion creates larger, heavier droplets that are less likely to drift away from the target area. This is often used with herbicides applied in large open areas like utility corridors. When would I use a plant penetrant? You would use a plant penetrant adjuvant with a pesticide when you want to enhance the pesticide's ability to penetrate the plant tissue, particularly when dealing with plants that have waxy or tough leaves which might resist absorption, allowing for better efficacy against weeds or pests with a hard-to-reach surface. Essentially, you use it to improve the absorption of the pesticide into the plant by breaking through the leaf's protective barrier. When would I use a safener? The reason why you would use a safener is typically because herbicide injury is a common problem during the application of herbicides in practice. However, applying herbicide safeners can avoid herbicide damage. Safeners selectively protect crops against herbicide injury without affecting the biological activity of herbicides against the target weeds. Let's talk about spreaders. A spreader allows pesticide to form a uniform coating layer over the treated surface. Also, we need to think about stickers. Stickers allow pesticide to stay on a treated surface. Some types of stickers increase adhesion of solid particles to a treated surface. This reduces the amount of pesticide that washes off due to rain or irrigation. Others reduce evaporation and/or slow photodegradation. When would I use a spreader? You would use a spreader adjuvant with a pesticide when you need to improve the coverage of the spray on a plant surface, particularly when dealing with a waxy or smooth leaf surface that might repel water droplets, ensuring the pesticide can spread evenly and effectively across the target area. This is especially important for herbicides where good leaf coverage is crucial for optimal weed control. Let's look at thickeners. These increase viscosity, thickness of spray mixtures. Thickeners may reduce drift and/or slow evaporation. Slowing evaporation is useful when applying systemic pesticides. It increases the time during which the active ingredient can be absorbed by or penetrate plant foliage. Wetting agents allow wettable powders to mix with water. So when would we use a thickener? You would use a thickener adjuvant with a pesticide when you need to reduce the spray drift by increasing the viscosity of the spray solution, ensuring the pesticide stays on the target area and doesn't drift to unintended locations. This is especially important in windy conditions or when spraying near sensitive areas like bodies of water. Let's talk about surfactants. Some of the most common adjuvants are surfactants, surface active ingredients, which alter the dispersing, spreading, and wetting properties of spray droplets. Examples of surfactants are wetting agents and spreaders. These products physically change the surface tension of a spray droplet. In order to perform well, some pesticide sprays must be able to wet treated foliage thoroughly and evenly. Surfactants that reduce surface tension enable droplets to spread out instead of bead up. This results in better coverage and increases the odds that the pest will contact the pesticides. Surfactants are particularly helpful when treating plants with waxy or hairy leaves. Surfactants are classified by how they split apart into charged atoms or molecules called ions. Anionic surfactants have a negative charge. They are most often used with contact pesticides, which control the pest by direct contact instead of being absorbed systemically. Cationic surfactants have a positive charge. Do not use them as standalone surfactants. Often they are phytotoxic. Nonionic surfactants have no electrical charge. They are often used with systemic products and help sprays penetrate plant cuticles. They are compatible with most pesticide products. A pesticide can behave very differently in the presence of an anionic, cationic, or nionic surfactant. For this reason, you must follow label directions when choosing one of these additives. Selecting the wrong surfactant can reduce efficacy and damage treated plants or surfaces. The terms used when talking about pesticide additives can be confusing. People sometimes use the words adjuvant and surfactant interchangeably. However, an adjuvant is any substance added to modify properties of a pesticide formulation or finished spray. A surfactant is a special kind of adjuvant, one that affects the interaction of a spray droplet and a treated surface. All surfactants are adjuvants, but not all adjuvants are surfactants. For example, drift control additives and safeners are not surfactants. You can see in the image here, we're showing you what a treatment looks like without a surfactant on the left and with a surfactant on the right. This gives you a really good idea when you look at the left how the product kind of beads up into droplets, but when you use that surfactant as you see on the right, it spreads evenly and thoroughly. That is the beauty of using a surfactant, is to get that really broad, even coverage across the plant itself. So how do we go about choosing the right adjuvant? Here are some factors to consider when deciding whether to use an adjuvant and how to choose the right one for a particular site and situation. Read the label. Is an adjuvant recommended? If so, what type? Do not make substitutions. Note that some product labels may recommend an adjuvant for one type of use or site, but prohibit any kind of adjuvant for another labeled use or site. Many end-use formulated products already have adjuvants, and adding adjuvants on the fly can decrease efficacy. Suppose, for example, that a certain product is formulated with a wetting agent. If you add another wetting agent when you mix and load a foliar applied spray, the product may not give better spreading and coverage. Instead, the extra adjuvant may increase runoff, reduce deposition, and even damage the target plant. Use only those adjuvants manufactured for agricultural or horticultural uses. Do not use industrial products or household detergents and pesticide spray mixes. Remember that no adjuvant is a substitute for good application practices. Take adjuvant performance claims with a grain of salt. Be skeptical of claims such as improves root uptake or keeps spray equipment clean unless a reliable source can provide research-based evidence to support them. Only use adjuvant products that have been tested and found effective for your intended use. Test spray mixes with adjuvants on a small area before proceeding with full-scale use. As part of today's training, we're going to look at a foaming agent label. Today's label is going to be on Outlast Pro foaming agent. I just want to mention to you, when we're looking at a label like we are now on this foaming agent, they're going to have a label just like a pesticide. So keep in mind, you're always going to need to read the label. That hasn't changed whether we're using an adjuvant or foaming agent like we are here. It doesn't really matter. Always read the label. But I do want you to understand that these are all going to have labels as well. As you can see here, we're looking at the top of the label, and what you're seeing is the product name, which in this case is Outlast Pro. Another good thing that this label is telling you is that it's a foaming agent. So you know exactly what type of formulation it is. The product name will be at the top, and then like we've always been talking about, you usually see what type of product it is below, which in this case it is a foaming agent. The next area of the label you'll see just below are going to be the principal functioning agents. Basically what these are is very similar to the active ingredients on a pesticide label. I'm not going to read through these, you can kind of see what they are, but look at the different percentages, and obviously at the end they're telling you all these components of the product itself are going to be 100% of the total at the bottom. You can take a quick moment and review this, but it's just giving you an idea that this is very similar to a pesticide label where you would see the active ingredients. The next part of our label is going to talk about the net contents. In this case, it's 16 fluid ounces, 1 US gallon. Now this label is going to have a signal word as well. Our signal word on this label is going to be warning, and it tells us to keep out of reach of children. So even though this is not a pesticide, it's just a foaming agent, we still have a signal word on it. So we still have to be very careful, make sure this is kept out of reach of children. As you can imagine, if a child was to drink this, it could be harmful to them. It really makes sense, but I wanted you to understand even something as simple as a foaming agent can have a signal word and can tell you things like this to keep out of reach of children to make sure you don't end up in a bad situation. In the next section of our label, we get the heading warning. Concentrate, causes mild skin irritation, causes eye irritation, wash exposed skin thoroughly after handling, toxic to aquatic life, harmful to aquatic life with long-lasting effects, avoid release to the environment. If in eyes, rinse cautiously with water for several minutes, remove contact lenses, if present and easy to do. Continue rinsing. If skin irritation occurs, get medical advice or attention. If eye irritation persists, get medical advice or attention. There's a couple things here I definitely find interesting. Number one, if we're adding this to a pesticide, we need to understand this label as well. Keep in mind, even if your pesticide has different types of things to be concerned about, We have to understand that here this can cause mild skin irritation. It can also cause eye irritation. Think about this. It says you got to wash exposed skin thoroughly after handling. These are all different than what might be on the pesticide label we're mixing it with. So we've got a second whole label to read here. Also understanding that this can be toxic to aquatic life, that's a really big deal. If we're spraying this in an area that's going to be near water or something like that, maybe our pesticide isn't toxic to aquatic life, but if this is, and as you see here, it has long-lasting effects, we got to be really careful with this product. Continued under the warning heading of the label, Outlast Pro is a surfactant-based foaming agent specifically designed to produce thick, dense foam with a good body for a variety of pest control, cleaning, and marking applications. Extended foam duration makes Outlast Pro the clear choice when results matter. This proprietary formula provides excellent performance with a fraction of the surfactant load compared to other foaming agents designed for similar uses. Less surfactant load leaves less residue in treated areas and the environment. Our next section of the label has the heading directions. Outlast Pro can be used with typical commercial foaming equipment available on the market and is compatible with a large range of products designed for industrial, commercial, agricultural, and residential application such as cleaning and disinfecting agents, biosanitation products, pesticides and pest control products, animal husbandry uses, spray marking, and more. Outlast Pro may be used in food processing and food handling establishments. The product is an ideal choice for improved coverage and contact time, minimization of loss, enhanced penetration, void filling such as wall voids and drains, short duration, residual protection, contact time and/or moisture retention. To ensure good foam results and adequate coverage, verify that all foaming equipment has been fully calibrated and is in proper working order. And I like the fact that it's telling us exactly how to use the product here and giving us some directions as to not even just its uses, but even the fact that it may be used in food processing and food handling establishments. We understand now that we can use this product for enhanced penetration, void filling such as wall voids and drains, and even for short duration residual protection. I found that to be very interesting as well. Obviously, another good thing the label tells us here, to ensure good foam results and adequate coverage, verify all foaming equipment has been fully calibrated and is in proper working order. So just like we would do with our pesticide, we need to calibrate the equipment. Well, obviously, even using a foaming agent, we're going to need to do this same thing. These are the types of questions we have as pest control people, because we're always looking to make sure we use the products correctly. Once again, just being a foaming agent, there's some really good and explicit directions here on how and where to use the product. The next section on our label is general mixing instructions. First, we're going to fill the tank or reservoir with water. Second, add a mix and material to be foamed. 3. Add Outlast Pro and mix gently. When mixing Outlast Pro with any other manufacturer's products, read and follow all secondary manufacturer's label instructions and add Outlast Pro as directed. Our next section of the label is going to be on use rates. As we can see in this section, the heading is use rates to produce A. Lower expansion, 5 to 10 to 1, or wet foam, 1/2 to 1 1/2 ounce per gallon. For a higher expansion, 11 to 20 to 1, or drier foam, 1 1/2 ounces to 8 ounces per gallon. Expansion rates will vary due to temperature, water hardness, material added, and foaming equipment used. Oil-based materials will generally require higher rates compared to water-based materials, not for aquatic use or post-harvest use on food or feed. So just looking at these use rates, we need to understand, do we need a wetter foam or do we need a drier foam? So that depends on how much expansion we need. So if we're needing less expansion or a wet foam, we're going to use a lower amount of the active ingredient. Whereas if we need that higher expansion, we're going to use the higher amount of the active ingredient for that drier foam. Very important here as well, these expansion rates are going to vary due to the temperature, water hardness, and material added, and even your foaming equipment used. So make sure you understand you're going to get different results based on these things. Some of this you just need experience out in the field to see how it works out. Just note these factors that can affect your expansion rates and understand they are going to be part of your planning when using this product. One last thing on here that I think is important as well. This is not for aquatic use, and you cannot use this post-harvest on food or feed. So if something's been harvested, you cannot use it on that food or feed for the obvious reason that somebody would probably ingest it at that point at some point in time. Our next section on the label is going to be storage and disposal. Store in original container. Keep tightly sealed when not in use. Store away from children and pets. Disposal. Dispose of contents container in accordance with local and state regulations. In the next section of the label, warranty limitations and disclaimer, to the extent consistent with applicable law, seller makes no warranty express or implied concerning the use of this product other than as indicated on the label. Buyer accepts this material subject to these terms and assumes all risk of usage and handling except when used or handled in accordance with this label. To the extent consistent with applicable law, there are no express or implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for any particular purpose except as specifically stated herein. Manufacturers shall not be liable for any consequential damages based on use of the product. Understand that last line. Manufacturer is not going to be liable for any consequential damages based on the use of this product. That means you as the applicator, you as the company, you're going to be liable. And here again, we're just saying make sure you follow the label and applicate with all products properly. On the last couple sections of our label, we're going to have the company that the product's been manufactured by. In this case, it's Rockwell Labs Ltd, as you can see on the screen. As with all labels, you're going to see the address, the phone number, and typically the website as well. This is just in case you need to get in contact with the company. Obviously, if it's an emergency or anything like that, you may call physicians, you may get medical help. But the reality is there's times where you may have questions about the product. So just keep in mind, no matter what product you're using, usually at the bottom of the label, you're going to have all their contact information, and you can find out most things you would want to know about the product by visiting the website, calling the number, or even writing them a letter if you feel the need to. On our final section of the label, you can see a couple things here. First, this product was made in the USA, but also you've got 2 states with registration numbers on the label. So whatever the case is, California and Washington require this product to have a registration number. So this is good information. Depending on what state you're in, sometimes you will see a registration number for a product in those states. So don't discount the bottom of a pesticide label. Make sure you read all the way through. Because in this case, if you're in California or Washington, you may need that registration number to prove that you know the product can be used in the state or even for your service tickets or other information. Summary. The ingredients of a formulated pesticide include both active and inert components. The active ingredient controls the pest. Inert ingredients include carriers or dilutants and adjuvants. The type of formulation may be provided in the identifying information on the front panel of the label. The STS for a product will describe the formulation and also provide information about hazardous, inert ingredients. Learn what formulations are available for the pesticide active ingredients you will see. To decide which formulation is best for a specific site and situation, you must know the properties and be able to evaluate the pros and cons of various formulation types. You must be familiar with formulation types and active ingredient properties in order to understand the characteristics of the products you use and apply them properly. Most in-use pesticide products contain adjuvants. Although adjuvants themselves lack any direct pesticidal activity, they are added to pesticide formulations to improve product performance. You should know when and how to use an adjuvant. You must consider several factors when choosing a pesticide formulation. These include the risk and benefits associated with the options available, the practicality of using a specific formulation in a particular site to control the target pest, and whether the formulated product will provide effective control. Understanding the properties of common formulations before choosing a pesticide will help you avoid problems and apply your product in an effective and efficient manner. The use of trade names in this publication is solely for the purpose of providing specific information or as examples. American Pest CEUs does not guarantee or warranty the products named, and references to them in this publication do not signify our approval to the exclusion of other products of suitable composition. All chemicals should be used in accordance with directions on the manufacturer's label. Use pesticides safely. Read and follow directions on the manufacturer's label. You have completed Chapter 4, Part 2, Knowing Your Formulations. Please proceed to the exam questions.